Welcome to the Equipping Leaders Podcast Leader Study Series. I'm Natasha, a leader development professional and overall leadership enthusiast.
And I'm Corey, a program manager and an emerging people leader, thus a leadership enthusiast.
We are doing a leader study of the TV show Z Nation, deconstructing the leaders, decisions, and team dynamics of the characters on the show. To look at how leadership is all around us, and even if we're not in a position of leadership, we can still demonstrate it in our actions, responses, and opportunities.
Z Nation aired from 2014 to 2018, but if you haven't seen it yet, there will be spoilers in these episodes. In this episode, we're talking about the last few episodes from season 3. Let's jump in.
So we're coming to the end of season 3. A lot of different things are happening. And in this episode, they grow up so quickly, which is episode 10 in season 3. We have people go, Doc and Addie specifically are going to find Lucy. So I'm going to turn it over to you. What were some of the leadership takeaways you saw in this episode?
I think one of the biggest things that I saw was initially you have you have Bite Mark kind of coming in to try to help out with things and see where they fit in, get closer to the group. But I also think what's interesting is the team now, Bite Mark as a whole, is as big or as involved as it's ever been, right? So essentially any living member, because this is zombie apocalypse, is kind of going towards this effort, including some folks like 5K and Red and some folks that weren't really always there. This is the biggest strength, the biggest numbers they've ever had going in. And what I think is really cool about that is it's a really cool opportunity for Warren to be, because some of those folks within the team, she was a different person, right? When the last time that she engaged with them, right? Or like she's evolved since then. So I think that's like, I think it's really cool opportunity to have such a full team and to be able to, move like as effectively as possible. So I think that's something that's really neat right now.
Absolutely. And it does help that, again, Warren gets to demonstrate a different type of leadership, because also at this point they have the Red Hand behind them because she vanquished Vasquez at the end of the last episode. So now she has the Red Hand as additional support. So you're right. It's the most army-like group that she's been able to lead up to this point. So yeah, I completely agree.
I didn't even think about her being a military leader pre-Z and now having this sort of army, and it's also a battle, right? And I think the army tends to train people up to be ready for battle and be leaders in battle, right? That's the purpose that they serve. So I think it's really cool that she's going to be able to lean on those skills that she had pre-Z, the past experience. I didn't even think about that. That's a really great point. And just goes to show, right, that those past experiences have value, right? Even though you're going to a new organization, what you did before can sometimes really help out with where you're going to. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it's those skills that you bring into it. I think we also see an interesting side of Warren in this also, where I would perceive it as devolving a little bit. She becomes a little bit too aggressive, a little bit too violent with the members of her team. And so I thought that was really interesting, because sometimes the stress of leadership and situations change how we show up. That's never an excuse. That is never an excuse. But I think it's one of those things where it's like, even Warren, this so consistent, so steady, so good at so many of the tasks of leadership, even she's roughing up 10K and she's doing all these different things. And in her mind, it becomes this like means to an end. But also, I think they say, you are made up of the people that you hang out with. So now she has this really violent group, the Red Hand, who are a part of this. And it almost seems like, well, this is okay to do. And I think that's just something that leaders, well, every person, but leaders especially need to be so aware of, because you will devolve quickly and it will seem fine. It will seem fine because of who is around you, but it's absolutely not, right? It's absolutely not who you are. It's absolutely not what the situation needs. But just that, like, remembering that sometimes it's the people that you're around. I know sometimes in the morning when I do my run, I'll listen to music that is, it's intense, right? It's supposed to like be, badass and keep me going. But then I'll show up to work, someone will have a very simple request. And in my mind, I'm like, who does this person think they are? And that's not right. Like, they have a very simple request. They've done nothing wrong. But because also I've just been feeding directly into my brain this very aggressive music, I then will show up. I mean, I don't show up because obviously I'm like, why am I so upset about this? But I think it's important to remember that, like, things in our environment are always giving inputs. And when you have certain types of people around you, they will make bad behavior seem like it's okay and acceptable.
You brought up so many great points, and I have several thoughts and comments. So, so number one, right, with Warren devolving a little bit, I agree. I was thinking, and that is the key thing that I think is very interesting, because right, it's so sorry. I have a lot of good points, but I got to gather my thoughts. With 10K and the way she reacted to him, wrong, right? She flew off the handle a little bit. However, comma and or but, right? Where I can see where she's coming from with that is he hid the fact that he was under Murphy's influence, right? He hid that from her. Doc knew, some other folks did. So not only did he withhold information from her, which she's really never withheld information from the group, right? Even when withholding it, in my opinion, would have been more beneficial to the group, she still shared that information, because that's the type of leader she is, right? She really embodies that transparency piece. So I think her being angry at him for hiding that and not even giving her the opportunity, because I don't think she's ever shown herself to be like, that's gonna cause an issue or she's gonna get rid of him from the group or anything. I think that upset her, that he didn't trust her enough, right? So I think it was like, a little bit of, I don't know what the word is for it, but she's more mad at herself that she gave him that thing, gave him the idea to think that. But I think also it became apparent that other people knew about it and also didn't tell Warren. So now his lie had the group lying to her, right? So it changed the culture there a little bit. So I think like that, I think is one part where I'm not saying what she did was right, but I can get in her headspace as to why she reacted the way she did. Number two, the other thing that was really interesting was, as she was sort of freaking out at 10K, Murphy was there. So you spent years, or however long it's been in the show, of her always having this moral high ground against Murphy, right? And no matter what, that was something that she could fall back on, and not from like an elitist or like that kind of way, but she always did the right thing, and that's what Murphy knew, and that's what everyone knew. And in like 30 seconds, she destroyed all of that moral high ground, right? Because now it was like, oh, your true colors have come out now, right? This is really all you care about, blah 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 type thing. And I'm putting way more emphasis on that than what I think is what really happened in this situation. But I think just from like from a real life perspective, and I feel it personally, because it's like, especially as a newer leader within my organization, I think as a newer leader just as a person, there's so little kind of equity that you've built up, that it's so easy to lose it, right? So it's not, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, I don't know how I'm trying to say that, but I just thought it was like really interesting that Murphy heard that, saw that. Now Murphy has this upper hand, right? Now he can present himself as being the reasonable one, and he's not. I just thought that was really interesting. because if you remember in this whole thing, then he goes on that whole rant about like a future without fear, and is like literally looking at Warren as he's saying this, because she was literally just kind of beating the snot out of 10K. I just, oh man, yeah, it's interesting. I'm sorry. I feel like you hate it. Go on.
No, you're good. You're good. I disagree. No, I agree in some parts. So the part where, like, you know, when Murphy kind of talks about that thing without fear. Okay, let me go back. I don't believe that you, like, when people are like, oh, you destroy all your trust, you destroy all the more, you don't. That's not how life works. That's like saying everything is black and white and everything's an on-off switch, and that is not accurate. So I think that we can absolutely make space for the gray space while also being like, yeah, we also like blip in time, right? Also, that's not how they consistently show up. So it's not like, oh, this is the new norm, this is who you truly are. It's more that, like, yeah, the stress of all this is getting to them. Maybe they need to take a little break so that they can come back and continue to show up. So I didn't really view it as like, oh, now this is who Warren is, and this is who everybody thinks she is, or she's lost all of her credibility. Instead, it was like, yeah, there's the stress of all these things. Was it the right approach? Absolutely not. But did it destroy who she is as a leader? I also think absolutely not. And I think that someone like Murphy, in the type of person and position of authority that he is, would use something like that. That's like kind of like what we were talking about in the last episode, where it's like, oh, there's this thing that you did forever ago. Now, in this situation, it was minutes ago, so totally fair. But some people, but that's something that someone like Murphy, a very weak and professionally immature leader, would do. Oh, remember that time you beat up 10K? Yeah. And then it's somebody like that who they can't move past it because they don't have any of their own ground to stand on. They're going to try to use something like that against her, instead of saying like, oh, here are the 10,000 ways that you showed up well. Nope, I'm going to point to the one where you didn't.
Yeah.
I feel like you're processing. I don't want to keep talking.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. You're right. You know, I think the other thing too is, no, I see where you come from, and like I said, I think I agree with everything you said. I think I was a little bit overemphasized it. Not that but yeah, it's, I just think like she gave. I think that now this like coming war, right, has been insured. And I think that, you know, with using the right hand, like you said, who's kind of more of a hammer, you know what I mean, for every problem. So like the be afraid thing and hanging up that banner and everything like that, I think that they could have taken a more rational approach. And I think that Murphy knows that he didn't have the strength of the numbers to fight a war. And I think that she kind of gave him, like, in his mind, she gave him the moral high ground, and I think it could have been resolved without the battle. You know what I mean? But like, just like that one moment, that one blip, I think sort of forced it more than maybe it had to be, I guess, as you start to move forward. But I you know, it's also a television show, right? So there's going to be a battle no matter what. So that's, I think, the other thing too. But it's yeah. No, that was a good one. And I think the other thing too is, as now you move forward and you have these conversations, I think Warren also starts to realize, and we talked about this like a while ago, Murphy just wants to feel like he has a voice. You know what I mean? And you, as the Murphy sympathizer, often like to point out that he got involved with this whole thing not under his own
Free will.
yeah, free will. Wow, I don't know why that was so hard for me to come up with. But there's something to unpack there. Let's leave it. Let's leave it packed for now. But I think Warren starts to talk to him more as another leader, right? Maybe different organization, you know, different camp, but she starts to address him more as a human, you know what I mean, and as another leader. And I think that she gets more from Murphy in that regard as well, and I think that's interesting. But, you know, I also think that Murphy's a master of manipulation. So, when they're fighting into the room, we know that he has the ability to control that child with his mind. So they're in a fight, so he brings her in to make her feel like a monster again. So I just think it's interesting. I don't know. There's more to unpack in this episode than I initially thought.
Yes, and I think to the her treating him differently, there is also a level of autonomy that he's created for himself, that now it's like she is not in the protector / get him to California role. He is the person, like, he has done fine on his own, right? He doesn't, it's a different type. They're like, just, they've both evolved. The situation, the relationship has shifted and evolved. So that's just, yeah, a different way of communicating with one another. And with this, even as we move kind of closer to the end of the season, we have everyone coming together, right? Lucy has been taken by the man, and Murphy knows that Warren knows how to track and find people. He is asking her for help in finding Lucy. She also agrees that this is an important thing to do. They're all teaming up together. So I think that was really interesting to see. They had been separated. Now they all come back together. Once again, they have this shared mission. They're going to go after Lucy. They're going to rescue Lucy. And even, I mean, because of his relationship to her, even Murphy is able to, whatever it was that was before, I'm willing to be a part of this group. I believe in this thing. So I think it just kind of goes to show, like, it's not even necessarily about buy-in. It's just about, like, is this something that's valuable to these people? That's how you get buy-in. And you can't lie and make it seem like it's valuable when it's not. When it's truly valuable, people will buy in. You don't have to get buy-in.
No, what I thought was so interesting is, again, I agree with you, and I think that the value of it is so apparent and discussed by everyone, and like that value is so well understood, that you have people like 5K, who is not a part of the main group, right? He's also a child who's willing to sacrifice himself for this mission, because it's such a clear-cut black and white, what is right and what is wrong, that even a child can understand what's at stake and is willing to sacrifice for this cause. I don't think that there is really any company in the world that has that clear and valuable of a mission statement, right? Nobody does anything that's that important. But even to be a fraction of a percent that clear, transparent, and have that much value, it borders on impossible not to get buy-in,
Yeah. Well, and you brought up so many great points in there where it's like, there's clarity. People want clarity. That's all they're asking for. And many leaders can't provide it. They don't know how to provide it. They think they're being clear. But I think that what they're forgetting is that they're being clear from a 30,000-foot view. And you have to be more nebulous at that place, because you're not trying to tell people how to do something. You're just trying to get to the what. And so I think, though, that when leaders, especially senior leaders, can be clear about roles and can be clear about, like, what is the result, like, what does success look like? What does support look like? What's important to me? What's important to this mission? What's important to you? Right. And if I can understand those things, which it's not that hard to talk to people, but if I can understand those things, then I can actually verbalize in a true way, this is why this is important. And I don't have to be like, and Corey, this is why this is important to you. I don't have to be like that person. I can, kind of like they're doing here. There's this overarching thing that's really valuable to us. This kid is another opportunity for us to find a vaccine. For Murphy, this is his kid. Also, he doesn't want her to be, subjected to science and all of that. So there are, all these different things are important, but they don't need to say what's important to each individual person. So I think there's also a matter there, going back to what you were saying in the previous episode about followership, where it's like, it's not always the leader's job to do absolutely everything and tell you, like, here's why you're important and here's what you should do. And there's also this inherent, intrinsic motivation that we have to show up, to try to understand and to do our part in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I right? I'm such good at this. I'm got a brilliant podcast. But yep, good talk. No, I think I think the point about I was because I was like trying to wonder like if you need if as a leader, if you need to be like, and this is why this is important to you, right? Like you were talking about that, right? She doesn't need to do that. Nobody needs to do it with this thing. It's like, is that an indicator? Like as a leader, like if all of a sudden I find myself saying, well, this is important to you because, is that a red flag? Do I stop? What do I reassess there, right? If I've reached the point where I need to say that phrase, what are the things that I should be looking at? Like what went wrong? You know what I mean? Because there's developing buy-in, right? Like, and I get that. There's also, I think in everything there's an aspect of buy-in from the perspective of this is why you should let me do this, or you know what I mean? You're making this sale, so to speak. But at what point should somebody already have buy-in? When you like I said, you know what I mean? Like what's the, and if you have to do that consistently, is your mission right? Right? Is your whatever you're trying to do, is your goals correct? Are you leading correctly? Or like do you have the right team for whatever you're trying to do?
So I think that every situation is as unique as the people in it, and there's so many other inputs. So I would never like use the phrasing that you use, and I know you're just doing that as an example, but I would never say this is important to you because you to assume to know the intentions of someone else is lunacy. Like that's, you never know. Like I said, different things can come up. If somebody has a sick kid at home, it doesn't matter what it's going on at work. Nothing there is important to them. And that's fair. So instead, just is expressing the value of it to different people. I'll use like this is a really low risk scenario, but it's like, hey, when you don't come to the staff meeting, I can't get information that I need from you to help remove obstacles from your plate or from your projects. And you can't give me that information either. And then your teammates feel like you don't care about their progress and they don't know about what's going on with yours. Right. So it'd be something like that, where it's like, let me tell you about the importance of this thing to this group. But I would also never do like invisible army. Everyone says, like, nobody thinks. No, you did not poll everybody. Nobody, like that's not a thing. So instead to just say, the value of this kind of around this scenario, because again, you can't know what is going on within each individual person. And you're right. If you try to like get to know people and then just use that as a way to be like, this is important to you because it can make you extra money. You're trying to put your kid through college. You're getting into a real area that is, could be ethically unsafe for people. But yeah, so I tend to just say like, this is why it's valuable to you as a professional in this role.
No, that's a good point.
But sorry.
Nope, go on.
But I think that kind of going to your other point where people are going to question, even people who are loyal and get the overarching mission, they're going to question things sometimes. And I don't think that unless somebody is bringing something to the table that it's like, this goal doesn't work and this is why, and unless you have evidence that points to you needing to shift it and not just people's feelings about what they do and don't want to do, you don't shift your goals and your vision and stuff like that. Now, then when you brought up the thing, like, do you have the right people? That could be the next thing. There's a table for everybody. Maybe this table just isn't for that person. I'm not saying you should just go around firing people, right? You want to make sure that, they understand that. That's another big thing too, is a lot of times because of the lack of clarity. And I know we keep talking about this, but it's a real problem. The lack of clarity, people don't know what it is that they are supposed to be doing or when it's due and stuff like that. So then they start to ask a lot of other questions because you haven't given them anything to focus on. So instead, they're going to rip it apart and make your life a living hell because you haven't been clear enough. They don't know what to do. So what's a board mind going to do? it's gonna poke holes and it's gonna find problems that don't exist and then try to solve those problems, which just makes a problem, which creates a problem and makes everything worse.
I'm feeling personally attacked with that last comment, but no biggie, no
You want to
biggie.
unpack that, Corey?
Nope, no, I do not. No, I do not. Okay, cool. Well, good talk. So I think the only other thing that I have kind of for this season, if you don't mind, wrapping,
Nope, you're good. That's what I was gonna do next too. Perfect.
synopsisizing. I think that's the right word.
That sounds true.
Yeah. Is so we talk about Lucy as being part of the mission now, right? Part of the goal. Some people buy into. We understand she's worth protecting. She's also just a child, right? And what comes along. But what I think is really interesting, and we don't talk about Lucy a lot, is she's a member of the team, right? She's a member of Bitemark. And what I think is really interesting about her is what we know is as she gets stressed, as she gets excited, as her emotions range high, she matures faster, right? So she can, and what I mean by that for anybody who maybe hasn't seen the show is she will age several years, right? So she will go from infant to toddler to kindergarten age. I don't know what that's called. Young adolescence? I don't know children. It's not my lane. But where I think that's so interesting is as a member of the team, she's advancing, right? So and her needs are changing like kind of dramatically from other members of the team. And I think that that's a really interesting thing because I think in real life, in a real team where you don't have children that can age several years, you will have members of your team, maybe somebody that comes in brand new, or maybe get two people that come in brand new. Maybe one person picks something up almost immediately, and it's as if they've been and they mesh really well, personalities align, and it almost, in a month of being a member of the team, it feels like there's never been a day without them, right? Or they become so integral, they're so important. And sometimes maybe that other person, it's taking them longer, or maybe there's somebody that's been on the team forever that something new has happened, they just can't adjust as quickly to it, or they don't want to, right? They're anchored on an old way of thinking, an old way of doing something. And I think that throughout this, you've seen Addie kind of she molds really well to that, right? She adjusts really well to that. And it's like just always having those right people. And I think that that's really interesting too, because with Lucy, I've been on teams where I've been the one who's adapted very quickly. I've also been on teams where I'm the one who it took a really long time to adapt, and maybe I never really fully did adapt. You know what I mean? And I always wish I would have had an Addie there to help me out.
I like that because that is essentially her onboarding buddy and her, a really great coworker, but also somebody more of a leader, like a mentor. So yeah, I think that's a really great point.
Yeah, that's one. I think then the other thing too. So that's just like it's sort of an off topic but on topic sort of offshoot. And then for this episode overall, I think what's really interesting is, or season, excuse me, for the season overall, I think one of the biggest takeaways is the amount of zombie issues has started to decline. So there's less life and death. Now it's just become a known static. Zombies are going to be there. We've seen really hard zombies. We've seen really easy zombies. It's not the issue now. Where the turmoil comes from the team is like internal or personal conflict. And I think that when you look at like that phases of the team dynamics, they understand the work, they understand the mission now. So any obstacles that exist are kind of almost like obstacles that they create for themselves. And I think that that's wearing on Warren as a leader differently. I think she's still a super great effective leader, full stop. But I think it was easier when it was just the zombies, right? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh gosh, this was so much easier when we didn't have the personal issues. And I think that that's pretty true of at least most of the organizations that I've ever been in.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Phew, what a rarity.